Hey everyone, it's time to review the Shrine Maiden Tsukiko, our latest global unit, and I have a very special guest today again. The title already spoils it though. It's Sinzar. Say hello.
What's up, guys? Glad to be talking about Tsukiko. She is pretty hype.
Indeed, she is. So, our very first global evocation neo vision unit. I remember there have been other evocation units, Emperor Fu and Morgana, right?
Yes, technically speaking, they were both evokers, but they were unfortunate for their time.
Indeed, especially Morgana. She never got the spotlight. Okay, so this is going to be a rather lengthy review, potentially, because there's lots to talk about. Tsukiko, she is kind of special in being the first evoker, and the current Clash of Worlds also is a little bit special in that it really wants you to use evokers. But I feel like overall, if you can just go off topic for just a second, how do you feel like about the current Clash of Worlds? Because I personally like it, but how do you like it?
I do like it, and I am incredibly happy that it is much more challenging than the last few. I say, like in videos and all, I really enjoy the challenge of Clash of Wills. But to go back to your point you just made, how this Clash of Wills really pigeonholes you to use an evoker. It's not required. You can cap without any evocation. But like it's night and day evocation versus non-evocation. I feel like they leaned way too far into like trying to force evokers, and that makes it makes like a more narrow team building options, and that I'm not super happy about. But I am glad that it is a challenging Clash of Wills.
Indeed, yeah. It's very pigeonholed. Like I tried Terra because I thought, yeah, she might work, but no. I abandoned that one real quick when I realized how bad Terra has become.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but let's get started with the review. As always, a basic overview of what Tsukiko is. So base form, she's a supporting mage. She can technically work as a mage, but I feel like she really is a supporter first and mage second. And Brave Shift, she is an Earth Evocation finisher. Now she can totally work as a light or fire chainer as well, but I feel like she really shines the most when she is Earth Evoking. So, the two example abilities that I have is Blessed Omamori in this case, because I feel like it's one of the most interesting parts of a kit. When I first read this ability, I didn't quite understand that it was actually a full duration rolling morale fill. Like it rolls every turn as long as it's on cooldown, and I find that super cool because that's kind of Kresnik-esque. She isn't as strong as Kresnik in terms of morale gain, but she really is good. I was taken aback by the morale fill abilities or potential of hers. How about you, Sinsar?
Oh yeah, it's pretty good. And the cool thing is, just like Kresnik, she can also, on top of the auto cast forever, if you want to like really dedicate her early turns to morale filling, you can even do something like just triple cast Prayer of Purification for another like 10% morale per turn on top of the auto casting. So yeah, she is very, very good. Not counting like the brokenness of the Chow counters, she's
Indeed.
probably our second highest morale fill behind Kresnik now.
Indeed, and that's why I feel like if you don't have Kresnik, but you have Tsukiko, even at EX0, EX1, you can safely do Clash. Now, granted, Clash forces you to have 16 out of 18 at minimum for capping it, but it still works if you just need that supporting role for morale. It's really good, and I'm very happy that we have a second option next to Kresnik. Though Kresnik does different things, healing and all that stuff. But it's a good spot to be in, especially for her, and that may save her longevity outside of her three elements that she supports.
Hmm.
Now, what I also like is that this ability does the Imperils, Firelight 120, and Earth 130, but also the Rod Imperil. Full duration, it's 5 turns, enemy 5 turns, meaning player 6 turns. It's good. I like that it's so slot efficient and does all things in one. Funnily speaking, I criticized this for some SLB units, but in this case, it's good because it's full duration. For JP units, it's mostly not the case, which, yeah, too bad. And the other one on the right hand side, the Brave Shift abilities Fox Karma Quicksand, is her breaking ability. I find it rather. It's a pity that it's only 85% breaks, because she's a breaker or has the break attack, but it's only 85%. I feel like that's just too little at this point, don't you think?
For using like in Clash of Wills or not Clash of Wills, using like in Dark Visions or like a Trial, it's definitely too low. We are way past the 85 meta. For Clash of Wills, 85 is for the most part pretty much fine because of the passives. That being said, until you brought that up, I almost completely forgot that she even has breaks in her kit, because there's at this point it feels like every other unit has breaks in their kit. So it's like, yeah, 85 is just like, we don't really care anymore.
Yeah, I'm just wondering now, what kind of breaks does Olive have? Doesn't she have higher breaks than her?
She has 85 to attack, magic, and defense, and then she has 90 to spirit.
On the SLB though. Yeah, okay.
The SLB, yes.
Okay, so outside the SLB they are actually the same, so nothing out of the ordinary here, I'd say. Okay. Good, and then the Fox's Karma Quicksand does some pretty decent damage, but it's not the main source of damage. That's on this slide. So let's start with the damaging abilities on the right hand side first. Now the interesting part is that she has two rechargeable abilities, so those are actually not premium locked, as we can see, and I like the concept of it. So you have to use a Fox's Karma Solar Flare, and the other one, which names I forgot for the fire part. And if you use those twice, you unlock the rechargeable Grandises, and those are 1200x modifiers. 2 part hits, 26 hits one, and then 26 hits, and then 1 finishing move. It's a cool concept, and it allows you to take 3 different routes of damage sources. It's either light, she has also the light imperil field, enemy side only, which I really do like. Take note, Esther. And yeah, the kit as a whole is very thought through and impactful, because no matter which route you take, you can always make sure 150 imperil is up, or 180 in case of Earth, and she does respectable damage in all 3 elements, the most obviously in the Earth department. So how do you like her kit? Because I love it. I really think it's a really well-rounded kit.
It's definitely very strong. One thing I would point out, though, is a little bit of a weakness here, is that her Rod Imperil and her Elemental Imperils, they are on a cooldown, meaning for bosses that, purge their debuffs, she is a little bit in trouble for those kind of bosses, because she cannot reapply those until that cooldown is, cooled off. Which does hurt a little bit. And then, as you mentioned for Esther, these fields cannot be reapplied ever. There is no way to recharge the one-use Magnus. So really, it's only a problem with Esther. I can't think of any other unit we're using today that would interfere with her fields except Esther, but it does really make her and Esther not friendly. You can make it work, but it's definitely a headache.
Oh yeah, it is. The only way I theory crafted a hypothetical Dark Visions where you'd have to use Esther's field on turn 2, for example. Also use Tsukiko's field on turn 2, never do Esther's field ever again until the very last turn where you burst, and then you'd have to find a way to send Esther in last with another EN chainer. That would work. But it causes headaches, and it's probably not always going to be the best damaging rotation too, because in that case you'd have to send in Chizuru first. She'd have to have someone else to chain, not technically, but to ramp up her damage, she'd have to have someone else chaining with her. And that causes a lot of headaches for me personally, though. But yeah, there's also the elephant in the room at the bottom left. That is the EX plus 3 passive. Because that one is kind of a substantial upgrade to the unit itself, the Dutiful Priestess. 1000 magic, static obviously, 150 LB damage and 6x cap unlock, basically 1x in additional to her 5x. Yeah, it's a huge power difference, and I don't know how I feel about it. What about you, Sinzar?
Yeah, it is definitely a really big power jump. And again, I have like sort of mixed feelings here. On the one hand, it feels terrible that so much power is locked between EX3. At the same time, I have a little bit complained in the past, to friends, not really, in videos, but to friends on Discord, how it feels like most of the time going to EX3. This is actually more of a case for older units. When you go to EX3, there's literally no point, like nothing happens. And I wanted like EX3 skill to be more like an accomplishment, more of a noticeable power gain. That being said, be careful what you wish for, because this is exactly what I kind of sort of said I wanted to see. And now that we have it, I'm like, it feels actually kind of bad. So I don't know. Like it's really a double-edged sword. Like I want it to feel good that I got a unit to EX3, but I don't want to feel bad until that happens. That's kind of what's happening right here. Like, for example, I used yours on a trial, and if you saw the damage breakdown afterwards, like ours geared literally identical just about on the same fight, exact same rotations, exact same skills per turn, and yours did like 30% more damage than mine, with the only difference being that yours was the EX3. Yeah. That's a massive, massive jump.
It absolutely is, and I feel like they did a fine job giving units 500 static magic as EX plus 3 passive, and I was like, yeah, that's fair. I guess that's a still decent chunk of damage on top. It's that sense of accomplishment that you've actually reached the X plus 3, but this blows things out of proportion. It allows you to gear the unit differently as to what you would at EX plus 2 to some degree. And this also makes her instantly cap, for example, LB damage, which is another issue because you technically don't have enough slots, if you're going for best in slot, to fit in LB damage. And I mean, yeah, it's kind of hard to... Or it's kind of disappointing to see the difference between EX plus 2 and EX plus 3. It's a bit too much, in my opinion.
Exactly, and just as you mentioned, the ease of gearing, so to speak, like as far as damage goes, on like a Dark Visions fight where we're taking 0 damage, bulk is irrelevant. The actual passives of like LB damage and chain cap are kind of irrelevant. Those are very easy to make up with like an EX2 build. But on like Clash of Wills, as we have both seen firsthand, well, I guess I have, I'm using her at EX2. Having to use extra gear slots to cap her LB damage and chain cap makes her extremely hard to gear for high resistances and all while still doing full damage. It's very tricky to do at EX2.
Indeed. And let's not forget the higher base stats of EX plus 3, which the whole points get extremely exacerbated. Oh my god, I've totally butchered that pronunciation, but you know what I mean? By the fact that you can use Focus Magic on her in base form, and thus increase her magic even more, and EX plus 3 gets so much more out of this.
Exactly, and I would almost kind of, it's not really a negative, but just almost like an oversight. So one thing they did on the global side is they designed her to where she is completely incompatible with like the evocation boost, like Yuna's STMR and all that. And that's fine because they tuned her to be good enough without that. So it's almost more like a quality of life to not have to deal with that. On the other hand, unlike for someone like, for example, Olive, they didn't give her innate focus. So you kind of have to do that for the best damage. And I would have much rathered her to have that in her kit innately. And that would have been just, a quality of life change. But she doesn't have that.
Totally agree with that one. And that brings us to the next point. It's the limit bursts. While this is a little bit small, I'll zoom in. The base form limit burst, from my point of view, this would have been the ideal opportunity to somehow incorporate her or incorporate a theoretical focus magic. Because this is already a supporting type, 55% amp for the party. It doesn't imbue though, so keep that in mind. 25 LB gauge for the entire party, and that includes herself, which I found very interesting. I tested this on Rafflesia because I have a clear in preparation, but I can't find Sinzar Tsukiko. The friendless boss is winning at the current time of day. But yeah, it includes herself, which is really cool. So almost half of her LB gauge is back to full. And yeah, what it does, it's a pretty much carbon copy of Sylvie's Earth Amp, but it's just for herself. So you can compare this to what's her name, Samurai Chizuru's Grandis, which you can only use, I believe, once or twice per fight, and this you could technically use forever and ever. And I would have liked if instead of the rolling amp, she'd have the focus magic, be it 300 or 500, I wouldn't mind, but I'd rather see this than the rolling amp, because the rolling amp, I can get that from Sylvie, and Sylvie's coming always. What about you?
If you notice right here in the description, it says increases earth magic and physical for the whole party by 55% for 2 turns. Do you think that potentially this was like a typo on the developer side, that they meant to do 3 turns? Because this is like incompatible with her using this for a good burst down. This feels, I swear this feels to be like a mistake.
Yeah, I was really irritated by this, that it's actually 2 turns. It doesn't line up with anything. Yeah, it lines up for Skyburst on Rafflesia if you want to use or go that route, but I mean, it doesn't do much. You'd have to use her LB twice in a row, or technically speaking, you'd have to LB with her 3 times in a row, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, such that she has her own 100% amp and the party has 55 amp still for her 100% amp. I don't know. I'd hope it's a typo, and I'd hope they fix that. But I've never come across a case where they actually fixed something like that. I see no reason for this LB other than amping herself, and I'd still use Sylvie nonetheless, so I don't see a point in that LB, to be honest.
Yeah, I guess if you don't have, maybe if you don't own Sylvie, for example, this would be good. But for the most part, I'd have to do math if it's even worth using this over. It probably would be 100%. I was gonna say if it's even worth using over focusing twice. It probably is now that I think about it. That's a huge amp increase. So that's probably worth it. But as far as using this on like damage per turn, like a trial or something, it's like never worth it, because you're gonna get more damage from using her shifted LB, and then instead of using this skill to like refill and stuff or to amp again, it's more damage to just cast Earthquake 3 times to refill and then do the LB again. So yeah, this base form LB, it just feels almost like useless, kind of.
Exactly. This also is, or another thing to consider is that her regular imbue and amp is 45%. So even if you were to take account 55%, the jump isn't as much, and you still wouldn't LB. You have that 45 amp, that's good enough, and you could just deal damage instead. And I'd wager you do more damage that way. Oh well. So base LB kind of but the Brave Shifted LB on the other hand, that's where things get spicy. So first of all, it's a perfect dispel on the boss, which is very cool. 250 LB buff, 3 turns, and it's to herself asterisk, and then it's Earth Evoke, 125 for non-morale fights and 225 for morale fights, while also at the end of things increasing the evocation gauge to max, which is a nice bonus. But the damage itself, while the dark vision number seems rather low, the clash one is pretty high, and it shows in damage calculations, which we'll see later. But overall, 125, it feels low for dark visions or non-morale, don't you think?
It does seem that way, but it's because of the evocation stuff. It does scale higher than it would appear. And one common thing people will do is they'll compare it to, for example, like Yuna or the upcoming Dagger, and they have, after all the external modifiers, they've got about a 200x evocation LB. But like we talked about earlier, the ability to use magical focus is what takes this from a low looking to a high practical number.
Exactly. The thing that you guys have to always consider is Yuna, for example, is a spirit-based mage. So, like Sinzar mentioned, she does not have access to focus magic. And as we've all seen on units such as Olive, focus magic is one hell of a drug. It can make a unit that has a seemingly low modifier all of a sudden be your rank 1 DPS. So always keep that in mind. Low modifiers don't actually mean the end of things. It can work still. Take Sky, for example, 440 jump damage compared to, say, 600x LB modifiers. Well, the 440 seems slow, but when you consider the whole package, all of a sudden it's pretty strong. So don't judge a book by its cover, is what this LB teaches us, basically.
Mm-hmm. And there is one more thing I'd like to mention about this LB, is definitely a thumbs up to the design team that did the frames for this, because the timing on her LB, it's a one hit, but the timing works out to where if you spark chain this, or even just send it directly after an Extreme Nova, it'll perfectly cap at the end of Extreme Nova. And the reason this is good is it makes her LB completely effortless to use with Extreme Nova units, but more importantly, it means in, for example, Dark Visions, you can use her after Olive and still cap Olive's Extreme Nova and get that 90% break benefit. So it's very, very, very smooth use because of the wonderful frame timing. Thumbs up.
Absolutely. Yeah, I noticed that too. On my very first Limit Burst I used on her, and I loved it. The second I saw it, it was like top notch. Well done. And the art style of it is also really, really cool. It just looks fantastic. Even though it's one more instance of pets being yeeted. The first one being Renoa.
She's so mean to the pet fox. She like uses the fox as a weapon. And mentioning her field, just as a little call out, I love the field graphic.
Oh, yeah.
The field graphic is her pet fox floating above the battlefield. But when the fox is a field, he has this like angry, like mean look in his face. It's so adorable. I love it.
It is. It's the most lovely field effect I've ever seen. I like the bunny of Esther already, but that one takes the cake. It's amazing. Huge thumbs up to the art team from FFBE global team. Perfect. It's just literally perfect. Great stuff. Alright, now it's time to look at the TMR, STMR, and Vision card. All three of them are pretty good, but let's start with the Trustmaster. 60 magic, 50 Evo damage. Very important distinction. And Tsukiko variants only, meaning also the 7-star Tsukiko, have that nullify magic reduction, which, oh my god, don't get me started. I feel like, why did they do this? Yeah, it's a TMR. Maybe it shouldn't be as powerful as it is already for Tsukiko, but why that limit? I don't like it. It should be open to everybody. We have so few nullify magic reduction, or in general stat reduction items / materia. I feel like it should be open to everybody.
Definitely, it's really unnecessary that is locked.
Indeed. And then there's the Super Trustmaster, standard 200 rod variants and 1.25 to 1.75x, 230 magic, that's pretty good, and 50 Evo magic, as well as 500 static magic for Tsukiko variants. And I feel like even as a stat stick, this STMR is really strong. And with her having her own 30% Rod in Peril, this should become pretty much every mage's go-to weapon, even if it means sacrificing 50 LB damage if you can offset that different from other sources. But I feel like it's good. Not only good for herself, but really good for all other mages as well. What's your take on it?
It is good. It really depends on the mage. I would say in some scenarios, for some units, Return Nicole's STMR could be better because 100 LB damage and you're only losing a little bit of flat magic. But that one is an elemental weapon, so it won't really work on things like, Roberta, Angela, unless you're doing a water team. And Tsukiko's would be better in those scenarios. But yeah, the 50 Evo magic is, it may as well be Tsukiko only, because who else is going to use this? Like, are you
True.
still going to use like Rydia or something? Not really. I mean, it feels so bad because the old Evokers, they are just so beyond saving at this point. Like, Yuna is good, but Yuna uses Spirit, so she won't use this weapon. And all the other Evokers, like, they're so bad. They're so bad these days.
You could make Faris or Terra work. I'm kidding, obviously. Oh boy. What type of stat does Dagger use? Is she using Spirit too?
She's Spirit as well, just like Yuna. Yep, Spirit scaling. So she don't want this either.
Alum really started liking Spirit Unit, didn't they?
It's goofy.
Yeah. Oh well. And then there's the Vision card. Lovely art style. Yet again, they really nailed the art on Tsukiko, hands down. And it's 125 magic, base magic, which is really nice. 50 magic, unrestricted, as well as 50 LB damage and Evo damage, unrestricted. And it's just a 50 static magic that is locked to FFBE units. But nonetheless, I still feel like that this Vision card may as well be exclusive to Tsukiko, just because the 500 static magic kind of makes it a little bit hard to use for non-Tsukikos. But I could be wrong. I feel like most mages are using Dark Rain's card still, because it's so slot efficient, high LB damage, high stats, etc. And Yuna and Dagger will probably use something else, probably their own card. So I find it hard to rate this card. It's still very good in what it does, but might as well be Tsukiko exclusive, right?
Oh yeah, it's definitely one of her best in slots, depending on your EX level. I think this is her best in slot at EX2 and below.
Yeah.
But this card is like really close to Dark Rain. So if you don't have Dark Rain's card, or you're using multiple mages, this could very well be your second choice. It's still really good, but yeah, for the most part, Dark Rain's is overall better for the majority of units, possibly even on Tsukiko herself. I didn't actually calc her with Dark Rain's card at EX3. That might not be the best in slot. I'm not even sure. Have you checked?
I checked, and you can't cap stats with this card. You're missing on Evo damage, so you have to substitute somewhere else.
Okay,
that's the thing.
Yeah.
But then there is a different card that we've gotten this week, and it's the Kindhearted Demon one, which has identical base magic, 125. By the way, quick off topic, art style, really cool, I love it. And then there is the passives. And the passives, I feel like those really feel premium, like they all did for all Global Vision cards. 200 true double hand magic, no restriction. 100 Dragon and Fairy Killer with 50% Lightning and Earth resistance, again no restriction. And finally we've got 500 Static Magic and 50% Evo damage and magic. Last thing could have been Tsukiko exclusive, because there is no other relevant FFBE evoker, but I mean, this is pretty good in itself, right?
It is. This card, I would honestly consider more of a killer card. Like, for the most part, this is assuming you have access to every card in the game. For units that you're forcing double hand on, like Roberta, I feel like the Dazzle card is usually better. And then but for units that need killers, this is a great card. So for like a Brave XP, just regular old mage that needs more Fairy Killer or Dragon Killer, this is a top tier card for them, because you get the 100% killer on top of the 500 static magic. That's really good.
Yeah, and I like the addition of Fairy Killer on this. Obviously, it's made for this Clash, who is also a fairy. Well, it is fairy, right? Yeah, it is.
Yes, it's a fairy demon.
Exactly. And fairy is a little bit tricky to build on some mages, so I really appreciate the 100% on it. And yeah, like you mentioned, it directly challenges the what was the card? Dazzling Demoness?
Dazzling Demoness, yep.
Exactly, and Dark Rain's Vision card to some extent, obviously losing that 100% LB damage with this one, but I feel like the true double hand magic, because it is unrestricted and if you're forcing true double hand, highly valuable. That also implies that the unit you're trying to force double hand on has 6x cap innately, as has Roberta. I believe Roberta has 6x cap no matter whether you use dual wield or true double hand, right?
Yes, she does. Hers is unrestricted.
Yeah, right. So that's a good option for her as well. Okay, and now let's get to the nitty-gritty part. Before we get to this, one thing I'd like to point out: both Sinzar and I updated our damaging sheets, and the both of us are calculating now with actual current Clash of Wills bosses. So your sheet is updated for the Kappa or Giorgione, using the pinch hand movement for that, obviously. And I use the exact stats of the boss, but you only use the race type, correct?
Yes, because the race type, the reason for that, for me at least, is you could use the defensive spirit, but that's gonna move everyone up or down the chart literally the same ratio. Exactly. So like the ranking, for me, it feels like it's just more work to also calculate the defensive spirit on top of it.
Yeah, totally. For me, I just did this out of consistency with the Dark Visions sheet. So if I do that, if I do have actual values for Dark Visions, might as well do it for Clash of Wills too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I also think you recently added Sylvie stuff to your sheet, right?
Yes, for all of them, because Sylvie is so meta, and because on global they have consistently changed the final boss to be unlocked on elements. You can use anything you want. I kind of assume that Sylvie will be on literally every single best in slot team on both Dark Visions and Clash of Wills. So if you own Sylvie, you're going to use Sylvie. So I have decided to just baseline assume her in every single calculation.
Okay, yeah, great. I did the same basically. So you guys have a great choice of either my sheet for very specific ones, stats for the very current Clash boss, or you have Sinzar stats with more open, no boss stats, so very high damage. But our sheets should be the same with just very, very minor differences, and then most differences are in jump units because those tend to gear differently when hitting races or not. So, the Tsukiko builds. I included both EX2 and EX plus 3 because it's actually such a huge deal, and this is where you actually can see what the difference is. Like the EX plus 3 Tsukiko can use the Clash Clothes. I purposefully used the chain cap clothes. You don't need those. You would actually use the static magic one. But for consistency's sake, even if a unit has innate 6x cap, I still use the Magister's one. I did the same for Samurai Chizuru, so that's for consistency and not for inflating her numbers even more because they are already very high. But as you can see, the EX plus 2 one has best in slot Lulu's robe, as well as the Clash ring instead of the robe. And furthermore, the vision card is also different. While the EX plus 3 one uses the Kindhearted Demon one, the EX plus 2 one uses her own, like Sinzar mentioned a few minutes ago. So there are the differences, and the differences are pretty huge in terms of stats. It's 1.8k magic difference just by the 2 slot equipment slots, well 3 technically, and the EX level, and I feel like that's a very, very huge difference.
Oh yeah, it's something like what, 20%, 30% more of a damage gain. It's really big deal.
Absolutely. One thing I'd like to note is that there is still the option of the Hermit's Ring for Clash of Wills, which has LB damage as well as, I think, Evocation damage, which is really, really nice for her because it tremendously helps her cap that Evo damage. I believe Evo damage is the one where she lacks 150%, and it helps in that case, meaning you could eliminate one of the materia slots and use something else. But what would you use? Either bulk or GF extension? That's higher stats again. But that's an option. I wanted to include it. It's really good for her. And if you want to spend the extra Xenostone shards, well, there's your reason, I guess. Okay.
Because yeah, like in your build, at the top, the EX3 build, you could, for like the pure all-in for Tsukiko, you could do like the Ruler's Chest and the Emperor's Ring, and that would let her scale even higher than you could on the EX2 build.
Absolutely. And yeah, Hermit's Ring, adding to that plus GF extension, that's pretty much full on E. It works because she's evoked, and you could really take things up a notch with this build. But yeah, out of consistency, it only includes one clash item. So let's check out the comparisons. That's where things get interesting. Now, because I did split my sheet into Dark Visions and separately from that Clash of Worlds, we have the Dark Visions part first. And one thing I'd like to note very, very first is that evoke damage technically has to be compared to best case scenarios of units. Because evoke damage doesn't account for killers, it only accounts for evo mag and evo damage, which is not exactly the same as killers, but it works as, or somewhat same-ish, I would say. Though it's compounded, meaning it does scale a little bit better. But we'll have a sheet for that in just a second. So all in all, Tsukiko is the highest damage dealing mage, asterisk, if it's earth, element weak. And thus, she is 113.7.3, did I say that correct? 113.73% of Beach Blaster Olive. I had to keep myself from reading out what I had written. Olive's damage and 93% of Jack's damage. Now Jack, he is waterlogged, so don't mind him. But yeah, she is really strong as a mage when you compare her to units that are built against worst case scenarios. But that's why we have Sinzar's sheet, and Sinzar did a comparison for best case scenarios, and here things look rather different. So take it away, it's your sheet in that case.
For this one, these builds are before accounting for killers. So this is like with the assumption you're fighting an enemy that you almost like cap for free. So for example, Olive would be fighting, I don't even remember what her killers are, but she's got like basically capped killers for free versus like 3 races or something, like a bird. Like so if Olive was fighting a pure bird, she caps for free. So this would be like a build for her, or like Angela, stuff like that. So this is like before you account for killers, and again, Tsukiko is scaled there. Also, this is only accounting for a 450% killer. So, for example, you could use something like single target 250s on a unit from Sylvie, or you could share 250 to the party for Zahn, in which case other units will scale higher or lower. But yeah, regardless, as you can see from here, Tsukiko is very, very high. And I'm honestly probably going to be killing Angela on my sheet pretty soon, because as we talked about beforehand, I feel like Angela is no longer a realistic comparison because of just the meta in Dark Visions because of Titus STMR.
Yeah, upcoming units. So the 5-turn meta, it's here to stay. Going by JP, even Cloud, the premium Cloud that is coming in, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. He has that 5-turn LB modifier boost in his kit too, meaning that 5-turn meta is not going away. It's here to stay, and that really means Angela has no place in the meta anymore. You just can't wait for 12 turns when all the other DPSers are technically losing out in damage. It doesn't affect Tsukiko as much, but it does, for example, for Beach Blaster Olive or Esther, actually Esther to some degree too, but also Chizuru, if you're using the Smile card on her. There's just way too many units that hinge too much on that 5-turn Doom's Clock, and Angela just can't keep up anymore. But maybe it's a good thing too, because Angela had a technically good run.
like a year. And actually, for mage fights, mage specific sub bosses, Angela could still be very well worth using over like your one unit using the 5-turn smile card on a mage team.
Oh yeah,
and basically just be Olive using the smile card, and the rest of the team could go any turn you want. So Angela could still use on mage fights, but for the final boss, I feel like you're not going to see any more turn 12 on the final boss ever again.
Which, honestly, I think is a good thing. I hated going to turn 12 on a final boss. I feel like it's okay on sub-bosses. But man, did I hate going to turn 12 with Angela. Oh boy. Oh well. But then there's also Clash of Wills damage. And here both our sheets are pretty much the same, with Tsukiko for this very specific. Clash of Wills being ranked 1. To nobody's surprise, honestly. Olive was rank 1 last month, and Chizuru before that. But yeah, all in all, I feel like even if she doesn't hit Earth, she's still a very, very potent mage. She sims just above Esther, at least in my sheet, I believe in yours too. And for fire damage, because for that one we could technically go to 100% amp if you include Leftia with her upgrades. But if you don't and only have a 45% amp, she'd be equivalent to the light portion, where she isn't super strong anymore, but still better than Wilk. And I mean, he's a premium unit. I feel like he fell off of a cliff way too soon.
Yeah, Wilk is a huge disappointment for me. I pulled him to EX3 as a premium unit, and on the one hand, his card is amazing. I use it consistently, always. But like the unit itself, Wilk feels like it's time for his intrinsic ability to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I don't know. It's just, and I think we also talked about Wilk's clunky rotation A and potential longevity issues when he came out. I distinctly remember us talking about this exact issue when he was released alongside Sylvie a few months ago. It's kind of funny how we were that correct, but none of us probably expected to have this happen so soon. Hoo boy. It's either power creep really stepped up, which is the case actually, or Wilk was never good to begin with and we were all wrong. But at least, Wilk still has a place in Dark Visions for that 90% defense break, right?
I guess, technically speaking, honestly, if we're going to be honest here, my personal prediction, assuming that the next Dark Visions, to go off topic a little bit,
sure.
You can quote me if I'm wrong here in the future. I very strongly feel like the next Dark Visions, the perfect team is going to be Tsukiko and Tulian for the 160 Earth in Peril and 89% defense break. I don't feel like a 1% defense break is worth losing a 40% higher in Peril. No, 30% higher in Peril.
Yeah.
So I think Tulian's going to be better than Wilk in upcoming Dark Visions because of his upgrade.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah. I guess with that much of an upgrade, I should really get my Tulian to EX+3 now that you mentioned this. Yeah, that's a really good point. So Wilk really needs upgrades. What we also need, going by this sheet, is we really need a 100% light amp stat. It would make other units decent. I don't want to say good, but decent. For example, Knights of Grandshield. Anyone? Has anyone ever used him?
Oh jeez. His one fight got taken away.
Yep. Oh boy. Oh well. And lastly, another sheet for damage difference is EX+2 versus EX+3, because we talked a lot about the differences, but how does it translate into numbers? So that's from my sheet. Again, you can check this out in my sheet. I will delete the stuff though next week when we get our next unit. But for now, it's staying, so you can even check this out. once you watch the review for another week. But all in all, the difference, according to my sheet, is a staggering 27.54%. And that's too much. It's way blown out of proportion, in my opinion. And it's getting worse the less gearing options you have. That EX plus 3 difference is just too much. And I don't know. And yeah, I lost my chain of thought now.
Oh yeah. For me, the bigger thing is the harder gearing at the lower EX levels, especially like I said, for this Clash of Wills, where you really have to gear for bulk, and that is tricky to do on her at EX2.
Yeah, and for this Clash of Wills in particular, going for focus magic is a huge risk unless you're doing this on turn 5, which is a safe turn. But any point before that, boy, you're gonna need that guts. She gets demolished by that dot when she focuses. Yeah, and that pretty much leads us to the verdict. I rated her 9 out of 10. I would have loved giving her a 10 out of 10, but there are some issues that we cannot overlook. So let's start with the shorter list of this, the bad things. She can't cross-summon Espers. We haven't mentioned that yet, but I found that irritating. I distinctly remember having one moment during my Clash run where I wanted to use a Lakshmi, and I wanted to use Tsukiko specifically for this. Because whenever I think of Evocation magic users, I think of units that can cross-summon all Espers from the party. Tsukiko can't. And I was like, why can't she? I feel like that's another oversight, next to the limit burst being 2 turns of 55% M for the party. But
it is true. And also, just basically on the same topic, something else she's lacking that just about every evoker has is innate Esper stats. Pretty much all the evokers since Terra have either 100% or just default capped passive Esper stats. I'm talking about things like the GF focus, but units like Terra have that built into their kit naturally, because kind of like, symbolizes their synergy with Espers. So they have, this passively capped off Esper stats. Tsukiko has none whatsoever. So it feels like, not really to insult or talk down to the unit designer, but it feels like the unit designer just decided, I'm going to make a meta unit, but I'm not really going to follow the Esper design theme, so to speak, or the evoker design theme, which is, whatever. The unit is still extremely strong, but it does feel like they just didn't care the fact that she's an evoker.
Yeah, that's true. Now that I didn't even realize she doesn't have any Esper stat passives. I just blanket gave her GF extension to try it out and was accepting the fact that it actually increases her stats. I never realized it's because she doesn't have any passives for that. It really makes it feel like an oversight, but oh well. And then obviously the X power difference, we talked about this a lot. And another thing that I'd like to point out is that she has no active killer buffs. She does have passive killers in her base kit, because she is not a evocation mage or an evocation mage in base form, but she has no killer buffs. This would have been an ideal case scenario for giving her, say, 200% buffs, or 150 for the party would be enough to Fairy and Demon. But I guess with Kaito being her BFF, they kind of decided not to do that. But she's a support unit in base, first and foremost, so I'd like to have killer buffs on my supporting unit. Full stop.
And also, just to briefly mention the base form, I have seen so many people asking in Discord, etc., to please calculate and explain how to use her base form for damage. Let me just put it out there: you don't. Period. You just don't damage in the base form. The only reason you would ever possibly use those base form skills is if you're an EX0 Tsukiko and you just can't shift. Any other time, the shift form skills will always outdamage the base form skills.
Yeah, that's a good point. Absolutely. Well, but technically she has 300% to 4 races. I don't remember which ones because I'll never use her base form chains, but you could, but you shouldn't, definitely.
Yeah.
Alright, and the good side of things, she does have superb damage potential, gets passively buffed by Julian soon, hopefully, and she's very, very strong in Dark Visions and Clash of Wills alike, and this is just me, I feel like Tsukiko is more a Dark Visions unit than she is a Clash unit. Now, I might be totally wrong on this, but hear me out. The fields, the free fields that she has, make her so much more valuable in Dark Visions than in Clash. In Clash, yeah, she's cool and all, but when none of the elements align, she won't do anything. She won't be useful. In Dark Visions, however, we don't have those JP-style Dark Visions where you're locked to one element. The final boss is always 80% to all elements, meaning you could use Tsukiko for an Earth meta, which Julian will only make even stronger, so I feel like she has a better place, high longevity in Dark Visions than in Clash, thus I feel like she's more a Dark Visions unit. How do you feel about that?
Everything you said is true, but I would say she is still extremely capable in Clash just because, like we mentioned, she is just, but not even counting the damage, she is our second best morale battery. And she has, different support than Kresnik. Kresnik is basically, other than morale, like really, Kresnik is just immunity buffs, and that's it. Like he heals, sure, but does that even matter anymore? While on the other hand, Tsukiko has just more support. She's got the morale fill, the 3 different imbues, the amplifies, the fields, and all that. So I feel like just for at the point her damage falls off to being no longer relevant, she would still kind of earn her spot as a morale battery, unless, of course, we get new morale batteries that phase her out. But at this point in time, like her morale fill, you don't really notice it this Clash, because this Clash is like free morale, like no one cares. Morale is very, very easy this one. But for last month, I would have loved to have Tsukiko on the party to fill that morale gauge.
Yeah, true. I was just assuming we'd all use Chao again for morale, but yeah, I think you're right. I totally believe you're right on the morale part. She should be still valuable, and even if push comes to shove, you can always blanket remove on demand all imperils, because that's what she does too.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason?
Very good.
Because, and it works. So yeah, and another cool thing is that she has an impactful kit, very diversified with 3 distinct element roots, which I personally like. 150 total imperil, including the field. So her 120 imperils on the cooldown, yes, they are low, but I feel like people are just pushing aside the fields and just say 120 imperils are so 2020, who cares? Yeah, technically you're right, but factually you're wrong, because you have to always account for the field, because it's 15 turns. And when do you ever go past turn 15 unless you want to go a Flip method style turn 200 budget road? Which Flip is a great guy, and I love his budget guides. Those go the extra mile, but those are corner cases. You technically never want to go past turn 15, trust me. And yeah, strong vision card and STMR pretty much complete the whole kit, and I came down to a 9 out of 10. Would you agree with that, or would you rate her a little bit lower?
If I was going to give her a numerical rating out of 10, I would probably say closer to 8. Not because she's a bad unit, just because the only things I would put like at 9s and 10s are something like Sylvie that does literally everything.
Yeah.
So Tsukiko does have a decent support kit. It's not as big of a support kit as like Chizuru. I would put Chizuru at like a 9, because Chizuru has like a really wide support kit. She does all kind of stuff and good damage. Tsukiko does phenomenal damage. She does a few support things. They're really good support things, but it's not really that many. Like other than imbues and imperils, that's like kind of where it ends. So I'd say 8. But that is certainly not to say she's a bad unit. She's a wonderful unit.
And now that you mention it, I gave Chizuru a 9 too, and now I'm kind of starting to doubt that the 9 is justified when the difference between what Chizuru does with all her kit compared to Tsukiko, but whew, yeah, it makes me think, is 8 probably the better one to just for comparison's sake? It might be actually. But yeah, just if you're wondering, that's for you guys, what the ratings on my sheet reflect. So a 1 out of 10 doesn't mean a unit is necessarily bad, it just says that a unit has a super niche case. A unit such as Summer Sniper Physalis is a 1 out of 10 because she's water hardlocked. There's no saving grace for her. If it's not water, she does literally nothing. A unit such as Sylvie, who I rated 10 out of 10 for example, is used at all times. She is super meta, and thus a unit that is closer to 10, meaning a 9, will see a high amount of usage. So maybe after all, I probably should have rated her at 8. That probably reflects her longevity and what she can do better than a 9. Yeah, you made me think, and I'll think about it after the video too. But all in all, from my point of view, Shrine Maiden Tsukiko is another home run of a unit. She's really good, super versatile. Even if she doesn't, like you mentioned, even if she doesn't hit on element, she still works tremendously well as a morale battery and supporting unit. And I feel like she's a good substitute for Kresnik, not surpassing in terms of morale, but all in all, amazing unit and one of my personal must pulls, so to say.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I'll also point out, just more benefits to Tsukiko is going forward in the future, the 12 takedown trials. So we saw Rafflesia, and Rafflesia was the start of the trials where you kind of don't have to, but you really want to use an Imperil field to make them weak. We've got 5 more upcoming. We've got Cerberus, who one of his weak elements is fire. You want to use a fire field. Tsukiko covers it. The next one is Catastrophe, which is weak to light element. You need a light Imperil field. Tsukiko covers it. After that is Octomammon. Octomammon doesn't match any of her elements, unfortunately. That being said, Octomammon is literally one of the easiest 12 races since Stroper. I auto-battled it in 15 turns on JP. It is a joke. So who cares that Tsukiko can't come? Then it gets harder again. We've got Dark Dragon. Dark Dragon is once again weak to light element. Perfect for Tsukiko. And then the final 12 race trial is the Iron Colossus, weak to all 8. Well, I say weak. He's 200 resist to all 8 elements. So you pick any element you want. So for that one, Tsukiko on the Earth Imperil field, Grand Slam. So she's going to be amazing for 5 of the upcoming race trials. Not to mention Rafflesia is amazing for her as it is.
Indeed. That sounds really good. I don't really follow the JP 12 race trials that much, but thank you very much for the info. So that makes her an even better investment for everybody else. That's really cool to know. Thank you very much for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that pretty much marks the end of today's review. Almost an hour in, but I feel like she is worth it. Absolutely. So yeah, that leaves me with saying thank you very much for your great insights yet again, Sinzar. Thank you very much for joining. And yeah, do you have any closing comments?
Not really, other than I'm very sad at Tsukiko for hating me and not showing up on either of my accounts other than once.
Yeah, I was hoping that Rasnus would get her.
He did get 1 copy before Pity, so that was amazing, but still, I would have wanted way more.
Yeah, indeed. But oh well. Eventually you will have an EX plus 3 to unlock a true potential.
Soon.
Exactly, yeah. Well, thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the Saturday, evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're from. And we'll see each other for my next video, which is going to be Rafflesia with mine and Sinzar's Tsukiko. Look forward to that. It's gonna be fun.
See you later.
Bye bye.